Hello and welcome to Current Affairs on JTV, the global Jewish channel.
Tomorrow evening it will be my pleasure and my honour to host an event in Parliament where our friends from Hezbollah will be speaking. I'd also invited friends from Hamas to come and speak as well.
Let's remember, when Hitler won his election in 1932, his policy then was that Jews should be moved to Israel. He was supporting Zionism. I'm not interested in the history of the 1930s. I don't think it has any direct...
Then why make pronouncements on it?
I'm
not interested, why make... But you didn't know the facts. You've admitted you're not in command of the facts. No. Viewers will know that recently the Labour Party concluded an inquiry into anti-Semitism and other forms of racism, which was regarded by some as a bit of a whitewash. Well, today I've been able to catch up with the author and lead inquirer in the report, Shami Chakrabarti, human rights lawyer, former director of Liberty. Let's see what she has to say. Don't you think that Jeremy Corbyn embodies the problem? If you were offered a place in the House of Lords, would you take it?
Goodness me, but...
That's a general question.
I don't know.
Have you been offered a place?
I don't know whether I want to talk about my future ambitions at this point.
But have you been offered a place in the House of Lords?
You can ask the question, and I'm going to evade it at this point.
Okay. You've seen this video we're going to show you now. I'd like your comments on it, though, if you can play the video.
I'm sorry about that.
You saw what happened?
Yeah, I did. I sent you a text about it.
I outed Smith, bloody talking to the Tory graft.
Doesn't look like the leader's too unhappy by what happened.
Well, maybe you'll have to invite the leader to sit in this chair, but what...
You can see that doesn't look good. Shami, thank you very much for joining me today. Now, we'll obviously come and analyse the report in detail, its conclusions. But let me start with a sort of broader question. Why was this report needed in the first place? And I say that because the Labour Party has always billed itself as the progressive party, the party against racism, yet suddenly it's holding an inquiry into just that factor. What's gone on there?
Well, there, unfortunately, is some anti-Semitism, some other manifestations of racism, and some thoroughly uncomradely behaviour that has been going on in the Labour Party. I don't think it's a new thing. I think it's gone on for a long time. I'm not saying it's the majority of people by any stretch within the party, but there is a nasty tradition, just as there are very positive traditions. And I think sometimes there's a danger in any progressive movement of thinking that you are an anti-racist party just because you say you are, and so it's very important that occasionally, when terrible incidents happen and concerns come to the surface, that a progressive political party looks at itself in the mirror and says we will be judged by higher standards, because these are the standards that we say society should live by. We have to live by them ourselves.
I understand that, but why particularly now? What was it that sparked? What was it that sparked this report?
I mean, so much has happened in the last couple of months, and I forgive your viewers for forgetting. So we're thinking back now to the end of April. There had been a number of high-profile incidents that I don't particularly want to dwell on because some of them are still subject to disciplinary investigation and so on. It would be wrong for me to comment, but I think your viewers might remember that there were various rows, there were various high-profile incidents that did the Labour Party no favours whatsoever. And I was asked just before that bank holiday weekend. I had retired from my work as director of Liberty. I was planning a nice relaxed summer, possibly even a gap year. And I got a telephone call asking me to to conduct an inquiry into anti-Semitism and broader issues of racism in the Labour Party.
But on that point, this is very interesting. All of the incidents you were referring to were about anti-Semitism. How did this suddenly become a report about more than anti-Semitism?
I think that it was partly in discussion with me. I discussed and negotiated and agreed my terms of reference.
But why would you do that then? Because it
well,
seems...
I feel very strongly about this. Actually, I'm happy to explain. I know that people had concerns that this might, in some way, be an attempt to dilute concerns about anti-Semitism. I've tried to be clear in the report about my reasoning, and I maintain my reasoning, which is that one of the dangers in political life generally, but perhaps on the left in particular, is of suggesting that there's some kind of hierarchy of injustice or victimhood or racism, that perhaps anti-Semitism isn't proper racism, because surely proper racism is always about white on black or rich on poor, and anti-Semitism is somehow a lesser sin or a lesser form of racism. I think that is a potential danger and maybe part of the historic problem of some parts of left thinking. And so I thought it was really important that was knocked on the head by setting anti-Semitism very much in the context of broader racism. I also think it's important because you'll see that some of the criticisms that I make in my report and some of my findings are structural, are process-based, are disciplinary. And if you're going to really get to grips with the disciplinary system in a party, that's got to apply to racism across the board. And I also found, I'm sorry to say, that there were other forms of racism bubbling away in parts of the party, and I think it was important that other people had the opportunity to come forward with those. But what I tried to do was to honour the particularity of people's experience, not run away from the anti-Semitism, but to, at the same time, to respond to the particular history and the particular story with universal principle. I think that's very important.
It's a wonderful intellectual argument. Great. From a theoretical point of view, fantastic. But it's rather like if there was a spate of road traffic accidents, suddenly creating a report that didn't just look at road traffic accidents, but also rail and air accidents as well in that kind of... It does sort of diminish, doesn't it, from the top? All the complaints are about... But all of them were about anti-Semitism. For you to broaden it seems an interesting intellectual exercise, as I quite accept. But you could have easily taken the findings of the disciplinary side and applied them across the board anyway. Well, it seems a little unusual that you decided to take it into the broader context.
Well, look, we disagree about this.
A number of people have suggested that it was sheer embarrassment, obviously, the Labour Party, given a string of these things, culminating, I think, in the Ken Livingstone episode, that forced this investigation. Do you feel that was the case?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to talk about particular cases, but frankly, it is embarrassing, isn't it? Of course. And, I've had some dealings with other inquiries over the years, and inquiries are usually caused by a scandal of some kind, whether it's phone hacking, whether it's whether it's a disaster, a physical disaster, or yes, unfortunately, it is scandals that cause inquiries. You'd appreciate that I'm a sort of human rights lawyer by background, and I've often joked about perhaps a dystopian future where lawyers don't get to do sort of traditional trials anymore because the politicians have got rid of jury trial in criminal cases and they've got rid of civil legal aid and so on. But there'll still be some work, it would seem, for lawyers sorting out inquiries, umpteen inquiries into scandals. Some of them quite political.
Well, this was, of course, supposed to be an independent inquiry. You're a Labour Party member. Baroness Royal was a Labour Party member.
Well, I mean, look, it's not a judicial. It was clearly not a judicial inquiry, and of course it couldn't be because this.
But why wouldn't you get outside experts to come in and do this? What doesn't seem to make much sense.
Look, I was asked to do this
by
the leader of the Labour Party.
Right.
On Friday, the 29th of April of this year.
Did you know him beforehand?
I knew him a bit over the years because he is as a backbench MP. He had been on demonstrations against the demolition of legal aid. He had been a great champion of refugees and so on. So,
but you wouldn't say you were friends?
Oh no, I mean we'd not ever broken bread together or no. But I knew him as one of a group of cross-party MPs, actually, in the Palace of Westminster who are interested in human rights issues. And so from my Liberty background, I knew him, and I certainly knew of his work, but that was the extent of the connection. So, but my point is that this was not a judicial inquiry. There's a formal state process for creating judicial inquiry. So, for example, the last...
So you don't feel it needed to be...
Well, the point is, whether it couldn't be. It wasn't, and it couldn't be.
Well, it could have been. Of course it could have been. You could have had 3 separate experts come in and, of course, analyse the situation. Of course you could have done.
I didn't set up this inquiry. The inquiry was set up by the Labour Party, by the leader of the Labour Party, for the Labour Party to look at itself in the mirror. And given that I was invited to do it, I made a judgment, firstly, that I was a Labour supporter and voter anywhere, undeclared up until that point because I'd been the director of a cross-party human rights organisation. But I also made the judgment that if I had difficult things to say, which I suspected I would, and I did, it would be better to say them from within the party, because I'm afraid, had concerns that there was a problem in part of the party's discourse and conduct, and I thought, you know, and because of my previous work, some people in the past had accused me of being a supporter of other political parties, of being too close to other parties. I'd campaigned on human rights issues during the War on Terror, for example, and Labour governments had been very cross with me. They'd been briefing against me. You know, I felt that there would be suspicions that I was out to do Labour people down by calling out some things in my report. So I made a judgment that I would do this
That's
from
all
within.
you can do, of course, in that context.
Yeah.
Now, you've just said something interesting. You've said, you know, the inquiry was set up by the leader for the Labour Party to take a mirror to itself and look at itself. Why do you think so many of these incidents, the scandals that we referred to earlier, have happened under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership? Have you got any theories for that?
Well, my own view, both from my life, growing up in northwest London, studying at the London School of Economics, being around in activism, and my experience from doing the inquiry, is that this, I'm afraid, has been an issue for quite a long time. This didn't start in recent times. This certainly didn't start under Mr. Corbyn's leadership. There has been a problem, I would argue, for at least my whole adult life. And it is too easy.
What is that problem then?
Well, the problem, a narrow problem of, no doubt, some genuine anti-Semitism, a slightly broader problem of some very sloppy discourse that may or may not be truly intended to be hateful, but has some very hateful results in people's experience, and then a broader problem of some just thoroughly rude and shouty and contemptuous discourse, not just in relation to racism, but in relation to women, in relation to people with whom you might disagree, an inability in some parts of the discourse to treat people with kindness, politeness, respect, to disagree well, and I think that has been a problem. To some extent, I can understand where it comes from. You know, if you're in 1900 and you're demonstrating in Hyde Park without a microphone, and the only way to be heard is to shout, you can get into a very shouty tradition, but in the 21st century, in particular with the advent of social media, that license to be aggressive and be shouty and be a permanent demonstrator rather than a debater can lead to some pretty unpleasant results.
Well, it's very interesting you've picked those 3 characteristics essentially. On the, there are genuine anti-Semites, then the sloppy discourse, and then the shouty demonstrators. And you've said the problem's been long-standing, all your lifetime. Don't you think that Jeremy Corbyn embodies the problem? He's a shouty demonstrator, an activist, someone who's marched for years on those very rallies you've just spoken about. Sloppy discourse, we've had plenty of examples of that. We'll come on to that in a moment. Not a genuine anti-Semite, perhaps, but those 2 issues, he has been part of that for all your lifetime.
Well,
Why have you not looked into his record as part of this?
Actually, I I did interview him. I did interview the leader of the Labour Party as part of my inquiry.
What did you ask him?
I asked him the questions that now everyone has heard the answers to, because they were subsequently asked again by the Home Affairs Select Committee. So I asked him about why he had described certain people as his friends, and why he had, if you like, shared a platform and greeted members of certain groups as his friends. And he gave me the answer that he subsequently gave.
You satisfied with those answers?
I believe his answers to be genuine. I believe that
they may be genuine, but are you satisfied that they fall within the parameters of what you just told me?
So what do you mean?
Sloppy language, shouting.
What he said he said himself to the Home Affairs Select Committee that he regretted having called certain people his friends and he wouldn't do it again. His answer is that he was using inclusive language in order to have some difficult conversations in the spirit of peace broking, and he's done it in the context of Northern Ireland, and he was doing it in the context of Israel and Palestine.
As we well know, in Northern Ireland, people weren't genocidal in their intent. If you look at the Hamas Charter, is the Hamas Charter anti-Semitic?
Absolutely.
Okay, so there's a big difference in being inclusive with open anti-Semites versus even terrorists in that regard.
The leader of the Labour Party went to the Home Affairs Select Committee and gave evidence that was akin to the evidence he gave to me, which is that he would not call these people his friends today. He regretted having used that language. It was an attempt to be inclusive at the time in the context of a difficult meeting.
Why didn't you include that in your report?
Because
you know how central that is to all of this.
I didn't do it in my report because I was staying off individuals, and I was not adjudicating.
He's not just an individual, he's the leader of the Labour Party.
I was not adjudicating on Mr Corbyn or his leadership or any other individual within the party. I felt that it was for him to make those statements publicly, for other people to in the end, in democratic politics, including in the context of leaders of parties, other people will judge. I'm not the adjudicator on who is or isn't the leader of the Labour Party, let alone on disciplinary matters.
But you can see the problem with your inquiry then, can't you? It's not just an ordinary Labour Party member. The leader of the party has legitimate questions asked about him, which he has to then apologise for. That surely has to infuse your whole inquiry as well.
Well, I feel that I dealt with the broad issues, and I feel that I made constructive suggestions for the party moving forward. As to individuals, those facing discipline will be dealt with via the disciplinary procedures, which I hope will now be improved and made more robust, not least because of the guidance I give about language and conduct. But I was not judge and jury over any individual. I was trying to look at the party in the round and make constructive suggestions for moving forward.
Once again, though, we have to just clear this point up. He's a leader of the Labour Party. People see his record. They see what he says. They see what he does. It's clearly no surprise that there's been an upsurge in incidents during his leadership, because you can't have the leader saying, "These are my friends, genocidal anti-Semites," and then ordinary members thinking, "Oh, it's not. It's okay for us as well." The leader has given us the green light.
The leader has spoken about it. It's not for me. It's for Labour members to.
But you are a Labour member as well.
Yeah. So yes, but I'm just one in the context of this.
But you were chairing this inquiry.
Let me know when you want me to respond.
Go for it.
So he asked me to do this inquiry. He didn't interfere with the inquiry. He saw my report the night before it was published, and didn't attempt to change a word. And couldn't have done, because I wouldn't have let that happen. He accepted the report without qualification, including some of the stuff that I say about language and conduct, which will not be completely comfortable reading to lots of people. And he has endorsed it in total. And I think if anybody can speak to what is now a mass movement of people, younger people who've returned to the Labour Party after some time, some people who are new to politics, if anybody can speak to them and say, behave yourselves, treat your fellow members, treat other people in society as you would like to be treated. If anybody has the legitimacy at this point to speak to that constituency, it is the leader, it is Mr. Corbyn.
I'm not sure he has any legitimacy on this point, since he had to apologise for those statements. How can someone who had to apologise for calling Hamas his friends, who had to apologise for the Raid Salah incident, who had to apologise for Stephen Sizer, how can someone who, even in 2015, Jeremy Corbyn writes a letter to Stephen
You're interviewing me as if I'm Jeremy Corbyn,
Sizer.
and I'm not. I'm neither Jeremy Corbyn.
You're not, but you were passing him notes during the Home Affairs Select Committee. You've produced a report which hasn't mentioned him, and you've given me your reasons why.
I was not adjudicating on any individual, and it wasn't my place to adjudicate on any. You can ask me whatever you like.
Do you think he was wrong to have done those things?
I think he was right to express regret, and I believed that it was sincere. He has said that he wouldn't use that language today, and I think that he understands the concern and the hurt and the fear and the vulnerability that stance and that statement has caused in the Jewish community, including members of his own party and his own constituency in the Labour Party, who were upset by the suggestion that he would call certain people his friends. And I believed his regret, and I believe that people who identify with him and follow his leadership and flock to his leadership, I believe and hope that they will listen and they will take his lead, and it will be better coming from him than it could be from you or me, because they are people who voted for him and see him as their leader. So it was right he expressed regret. Was he wrong to have done it in the first place? Well, I suspect that when people express regret, it's for things that they shouldn't have done in the first place. So I'm not dancing around this. Yes, he shouldn't have done it in the first place. I think he would admit himself that, if he had a time machine, and with hindsight, it was not the right thing to call people. This is a broader point that I think is of application not just to the leader but to all of us. I believe very much in debate. I believe very much that in the 21st century of the internet, the no platform tactic is not as effective as it would have been in previous days. But if you are going to, as sometimes I have had to do, go and have debate and discourse, whether it's in the spirit of peacemaking or whether it's in the spirit of challenging, when you have to go and share platforms or meetings or whatever with people who are espousing hateful views, you then have an enormous responsibility, and one has to be so careful about what one says and the optics for the people outside the room, and in particular to challenge hateful things. I've been accused of sharing platforms with all sorts of people as well. Sometimes I've been criticised for sharing platforms with people who went on subsequently to say hateful things that were, I couldn't have contemplated at the time. But I do understand that in this world of discourse and debate, if you're going to go into the lion's den, you better go prepared, and you better be very careful about what you say and how you say it. Nobody can possibly judge what people will say in the future. You can only look at the past. Sure. And I think, as has been addressed thoroughly, the leader did know what was in people's past. I have never brokered peace. I've never brokered peace. My career has been as a lawyer. I don't think Jeremy Corbyn has either. Well, he hasn't. Let's be honest. He hasn't been responsible for any peace settlements or any of this kind. You said debate and discourse a moment before. Yeah. Do you think the kind of debate and discourse that happened at the launch of your report was acceptable? Of course not. Right. So why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you mention it at least? Or why did Jeremy Corbyn not say anything? I did. Were you there? I wasn't there. Okay, so let me tell you my perception of someone who was attempting to chair this thing. It was a press conference. And of course it was a press conference around my report, but events had superseded my report. We're now in the civil war in the Labour Party, so it's very, very heavily attended, febrile atmosphere, lots of press, but lots of other people as well who had an interest in the reports. Clearly, there had been quite an atmosphere in the room whilst I had been in the ante-room. You could tell that there'd been some there'd been some kind of arguments and so on that had gone on, and I made some remarks. The leader made his speech. We had the Q&A, and then a gentleman began to heckle me and argue that I had only called white journalists to speak. I didn't believe that was the case, but I didn't. Obviously, at an event of that kind, you don't.
Sure.
So I said that he could speak next, and then he began a rant, and I shut it down as soon as I could. I admonished him, and I felt completely supported by the leader. But I was in the chair and I was dealing with it, and I slightly, but not too much, because I'm not a resentful person, but I slightly resent this idea that the little woman can't chair her own event and she can't deal with the heckler, and she needs the needs the
No, I get it.
the man to sort it out. So I did my best, but it's not a controlled, it's not a completely controlled environment.
You can't stop people shouting.
I did my best. I was being heckled. He had the gentleman concerned behaved very badly, and I went and apologised to Ruth.
You've
Smith.
seen this video we're going to show you now. I'd like your comments on it, though, if you can play the video.
I'm sorry about that.
You saw what happened?
Yeah, I did. I sent you a text about it.
Why are you pushing this?
No, don't. It's all right. I'm just trying to get out of a bit of a hurry. Sorry about that.
Look, I outed Smith, bloody talking to the Tory graft.
Doesn't look like the leader's too unhappy by what happened.
Well, maybe you'll have to invite the leader to sit in this chair, but what...
You can see that doesn't look good.
Well, do you want to know what I've been told is
Okay.
When I saw it, my heart sank too, but I have heard an explanation from the leader for what that means. Apparently, the gentleman in question was trying to get to the leader earlier that same week at a demonstration in Parliament Square, and he was either manhandled or not allowed to get to the leader by the police officers who were protecting the leader, and the gentleman in question is apparently an activist of many years' pedigree, and he complained to Mr. Corbyn about the fact that he'd been barred from getting to, or he'd been manhandled, whatever it is.
That's a text, I know, that's a reference.
So that's apparently
I understand
what the
reference
apology and the text message is for. It's not to do with the incident that's just happened.
Seems a little unusual, seeing as Jeremy Corbyn was standing there and he said, "Did you just see that?" Seems unlikely. That seems a very unusual.
Well,
but you're right. You can't answer that. You can't answer that. I know that's a fair point.
All I can do is tell you what I've been told. It's unfortunate.
Fair enough.
But the whole thing was. I think the really important point for your viewers is that some people said, in the context of my inquiry, that, I mean, just as you have your position, which is one of understandable scepticism about what I'm trying to do and real concern, I have no doubt, about these issues within the party and no doubt in society, there are other people who submitted to my inquiry that this was all nonsense, that this was a witch hunt, it was all, to get at the leader, etc., etc. There were people who were saying that, and then of course this happens at my inquiry, which I think just vindicates, my concern that there are issues that have to be dealt with. Yes, some of the issues are about anti-Semitism and other forms of racism, but there's also just thoroughly bad behaviour. I did not, and I would also say that perhaps one of the things that I now regret I didn't actually articulate in the report, because you finish, you at some point you have to finish writing.
Yeah.
But now I think on reflection, and it's a couple of weeks now, isn't it? On reflection, the one thing that I would have added is that in my experience, this hateful behaviour, whether it's overtly racist or not, is often laced with misogyny. And I have to say that when I felt that gentleman heckling me at my...
You felt it was part of that?
I felt it made, well, you know, I think, and also when I've seen evidence of anti-Semitic tweeting,
You see that as well in that?
I've often seen that some of the nastiest remarks and behaviour has the misogynistic twist, and some of the women targets have had the worst treatment.
Do you have political ambitions in the Labour Party?
Do I have political ambitions in the Labour Party?
Do you want to run as an MP?
I don't know. Probably not, but I don't know.
Okay. If you were offered a place in the House of Lords, would you take it?
Goodness me,
Just a general question.
I don't know.
Have you been offered a place?
I don't know whether I want to talk about my future ambitions at this point.
But have you been offered a place in the House of Lords?
You can ask the question, and I'm going to evade it at this point.
Okay. Looking quickly at some of the conclusions, obviously, it's notable you didn't mention anything, for example, about the Royal Report, which has been hidden, of course.
Okay, it's been hidden, of course. No,
well, the recommendations come out, but not the report itself.
So
should that report be firstly revealed in its entirety, and should the NEC endorse it and put it forward?
So the NEC obviously owns the Royal Report. The NEC commissioned the report. Unlike my reports, I would call it a hybrid report in that it touches on individuals and on incidents that would identify individuals. So it's not like my report, which is broader and thematic. It is, you know, it does actually get into individual misconduct, at least in part. And as a result of her findings, Baroness Royal has actually recommended certain individuals for discipline, and they were named and or otherwise identified in the report, which, as I understand it, is the reason why the full report was not published a couple of months ago. The question now is whether the disciplinary matters in question have got far enough down the road that it would be possible to publish a fuller version of the report, perhaps with some redactions, but to publish without compromising disciplinary proceedings. I hope that at a certain point it will be possible to publish as much of the Royal Report as possible.
And will you ask the NEC to do that?
Yes.
Okay. And with your report, will you again demand this time the NEC to actually implement it?
Absolutely. You know, that was 2 months of my life. I committed to it because I believed it was important, and I don't think that I'm asking too much of anyone to behave decently in a democratic socialist party, and I think that I would be very disappointed if that report wasn't embraced. I think I have a concern that because of, you know, internecine warfare within the Labour Party at the moment, it might be too easy for this to be overlooked. But I don't intend to go quietly about it because I care about the work, which is why I did it.
My final question: do you feel you might have missed an opportunity with this report to really get to the root cause of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, which is in particular this conflation of anti-Israel and anti-Jewish attitudes, which you yourself touched on that, but you haven't gone to the full length. You hinted at it. You say, for example, words like Zio should no longer be used, etc. Things like that.
I think I did more than that. I mean, I know...
You think you went above that?
I didn't just say... I mean, no. I think it's quite important to say that word shouldn't be used, because that needs to be absolutely strict liability, no excuses, no justification. The word, as I understand it, is only ever a racist epithet. It can never be used in any other way, and I compare it to. But you understand,
you understand the proxy use of Israel for Jew.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I say that in my report. I say that not Israel for Jew, but what I talk about in my report is the way that the term Zionist has been sometimes used euphemistically in relation to people who may or may not have a position on Israel. But of course, but that word can't be, if you like, banned in the way that Zio is because it is a word that some people use to self-identify. So, you know, there are issues around that. But I do feel that I touched on the stereotyping of some Jewish people and others, the assumption that one of your Jewish friends or neighbours or fellow members of the party would or would not have a particular position about the politics of Israel and Palestine. I've said that quite explicitly in the report, that is unacceptable, and there's been too much of it, and it's happened in particular on campuses, not exclusively on university campuses, but it's happened in particular on university campuses. It's particularly unfair in relation to young people away from home, perhaps for the first time, who just want to settle into university and go to the parties like everybody else, having to be grilled about their loyalty or their politics just because of their Jewish name or identity. I think I've been pretty clear and robust about that in the report.
I want to thank you for your time. I do want to thank you for your time, because I know it's a difficult subject to look at. I will leave you and our viewers with one thought, though. That answer you just gave me brings us back, in a sense, to Jeremy Corbyn, because while you have, you know, suggested and accepted this easy confluence between Zionist and Jew needs to be looked at carefully.
He's accepted it too.
Yeah, sure, but he's had a lifetime of using it. Well, even as recently as last year, as we well know, in that Stephen Sizer episode, to defend Sizer on the basis a Zionist lobby is out to get him suggests things beyond that. We don't need to talk about. We've discussed. We need to talk to him about that in that contest. I think we have to leave it at that point. It's a shame. I think the report didn't look at Jeremy Corbyn's specific role.
Can I just say that you? I mean, it's been great to talk to you, but I think you have. I think we disagree about some things, but the trick to this whole report, and the trick to making the party better and what it needs to be, and frankly making our entire politics better than it currently is in this country at the moment, is not about us not disagreeing, but it's about disagreeing well. And so I know that I've not persuaded you about the wisdom of my report or the efficacy or the point or whatever, but at least you gave me a fair hearing, and if people gave each other a fairer hearing in the Labour Party and in British politics, I think things would be a great deal better.
That, of course, is the noble wish. We will disagree, and I think the main disagreement really does come that people sometimes do matter. When you have the leader of a party who has spent a long time using the very words, using the phrases, using the actions that you yourself have looked at,
you're entitled
that you've
to your view.
looked at,
you're entitled to your view.
In that point, I think you have to look back and say this was perhaps a bit of a missed opportunity. And I think we'll disagree, obviously, on that. But look, Shami, thank you very much for joining me.
Pleasure.
Please do join us again soon for another episode of Current Affairs on JTV.